My name is Amelia, and I'm a 31-year-old events coordinator from Boston. I just drained my savings for my brother Leo's wedding. But after the party, I checked my bank account and saw another $400 had vanished. When I confronted my family, my own mother, Catherine, just laughed in my face. "You can't do anything about it," she sneered. My hands trembled as I reached into my purse and pulled out a thick envelope. "Don't you worry about what happens next," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Before we get into the rest of this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and be sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to your own family." Growing up in the Thorne family meant you knew your place in the pecking order. For me, that place was always a few rungs below my younger brother Leo. My parents, Robert and Catherine Thorne, owned a thriving real estate development firm in Boston. From the second Leo was born, it was crystal clear he was the heir apparent groomed to take over the family empire. I, on the other hand, was expected to marry into a good family and host elegant dinner parties. I know it sounds like something straight out of the 1950s. Our five-bedroom colonial in Brookline was a pressure cooker of unspoken rules and high expectations. My father's study was a no-go zone, unless you were formally summoned. My mother's obsession with perfection meant I was under a constant barrage of criticism for everything from my posture to my career path. Even my own childhood bedroom felt like a sterile guest room decorated to my mother's impeccable taste, not mine. I busted my butt academically, got into Northeastern for business, thinking that would finally win their approval. It didn't. Instead, the pressure was on to join Thorne Properties the second I graduated. I toughed it out for 3 years in the marketing department before I finally snapped. The blatant nepotism, the toxic office culture, my father publicly tearing apart my ideas in meetings, I couldn't take it anymore. "Marketing events is hardly a career, Amelia," my mother sniffed when I told them I was leaving to become an independent events coordinator. "It's more of a hobby, really." My father was blunter. "You're throwing away opportunities most people would kill for." But I did it. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in Cambridge and started grinding, building my client list from scratch. The first 2 years were brutal. I was living on instant ramen and working 16-hour days. But slowly, I built a reputation for pulling off flawless events on shoestring budgets. I wasn't making Thorne-level money, but I was paying my own bills, and for the first time I felt fulfilled. My brother Leo had it completely different. His C-average grades were brushed aside, his college fraternity antics were funded without question, and a cushy vice president position at the company was waiting for him. When he met Olivia Bancroft at a charity gala 3 years ago, my parents were over the moon. Her family owned a chain of luxury hotels all along the East Coast. The marriage was going to be a massive win for everyone. Everyone except me, it turned out. Olivia was gorgeous, sophisticated, and accustomed to always getting her way. She and my mother bonded instantly over a shared passion for five-star luxury and social status. When Leo proposed after a whirlwind 8-month romance, my parents immediately launched into planning the wedding of the century. The first budget talk happened over a tense family dinner at my parents' house. I sat there quietly picking at my mother's under-seasoned chicken as they threw around names of venues and guest lists. "We're thinking the Fairmont Copley Plaza for the reception," my mother announced. "The grand ballroom can hold 300 guests." I nearly choked on my water. 300, I thought this was going to be an intimate affair. Olivia let out a little laugh like I'd just said the most adorable, naive thing. "Leo's my one and only wedding. I'm not doing intimate." My father cleared his throat. "We'll handle the big-ticket items, of course. The venue, the catering, her dress. And we've already committed to the honeymoon," Olivia's father added. Then my mother turned to me, her eyes locking onto mine with that familiar look, the one that meant I was about to be volunteered for duty. "Amelia, with your connections in the event world, you could be such a help with the flowers and decorations. Yes, and perhaps the photography." It wasn't a question. Before I could even formulate a response, they were already on to planning the engagement party. By the time dinner was over, I had somehow agreed to help with some of the smaller details, though no one bothered to define what that actually meant. Over the next few weeks, those smaller details ballooned into massive expenses. Venue deposits, floral arrangements, photographer retainers, custom welcome baskets for the out-of-town guests. Every time I tried to raise a red flag about the spiraling costs, my mother would shut me down with something like, "It's your brother's only wedding, Amelia. Don't be so selfish." So, against every instinct I had, I started dipping into my savings, the money I'd been painstakingly setting aside for a down payment on a condo of my own. It started with a few $1,000s here and there, but it quickly snowballed. $5,000 turned into $10,000, and before I knew it, I had poured almost every cent I had saved into Leo and Olivia's perfect day. I kept telling myself it was an investment in my family, that this time finally my contribution would be seen and appreciated, that this time would be different. I couldn't have been more wrong. As a professional events coordinator, I knew exactly how fast wedding budgets can get out of hand. What I didn't see coming was how my own family would simultaneously exploit my expertise while completely dismissing it. "Amelia, you said you could handle the flowers, right?" my mother asked during one of our weekly planning sessions at her house. I'd agreed to simple, elegant floral arrangements for the ceremony and the reception tables. Nothing over the top. "Yes, I've gotten quotes from 3 different florists based on the original plan we talked about," I replied, pulling out my meticulously organized planning binder. My mother shot a look at Olivia. "Well, we've been thinking, instead of just simple centerpieces, what about full floral installations? Olivia saw this thing on Pinterest with suspended orchid garlands hanging over every single table. Wouldn't that be just divine?" The kind of installation she was dreamily describing would cost at least 3 times our initial flower budget. I took a deep breath. "Mom, that kind of installation is incredibly expensive. We're talking potentially thousands of dollars more than we budgeted." Olivia pouted. "But it would be so beautiful, and you know how much this means to me and Leo." Speaking of my brother, he was conveniently absent from almost all of these planning meetings, leaving me to fend off the increasingly outlandish demands of his fiancée and our mother. "I can get some quotes," I conceded, "but I can't promise anything." "Wonderful," my mother chirped, already moving on. "Now about the venue deposit. They need it by Friday." I frowned. I thought Dad was handling the venue. Another look passed between them. "There's been a slight change of plans. Your father's dealing with that situation with the seaport property, and the timing is just unfortunate. It would be so helpful if you could just cover the deposit for now. We'll reimburse you, of course." That "of course" hung in the air, a hollow promise I knew would never materialize. But what was I supposed to do? Say no, and be branded the evil sister who ruined her brother's wedding? So I paid the venue deposit, and then the upgraded linens, and then the premium open bar package. My best friend Chloe was my only anchor to reality during this whole nightmare. We met for coffee at our usual spot in Cambridge, and I just let it all pour out. "They're taking advantage of you, Amelia," she said, stirring her latte with unnecessary force. "You know that, right?" "It's complicated," I sighed. "It's family." "Family doesn't drain your life savings without a second thought," Chloe shot back. "Have they even properly thanked you for any of this?" I didn't have to answer. We both knew they hadn't. Instead of gratitude, I got a steady stream of criticism. My ideas were pedestrian. My vendor suggestions weren't up to par. My concerns about the budget were petty. To cover the tidal wave of expenses, I started taking on extra clients, working nights and weekends solid. I coordinated corporate events, milestone birthday parties, even a last-minute bar mitzvah. My apartment turned into a warehouse for wedding samples and supplies. My social life vanished. My health started to tank as sleep became a luxury I just couldn't afford. 2 months before the wedding, I sat on my bedroom floor surrounded by a mountain of spreadsheets and receipts. I calculated exactly how much I had spent so far: $21, $786. Almost every dollar I had in the world. Gone. And there were still outstanding invoices to pay. With a hand that wouldn't stop shaking, I transferred another chunk of money from my savings to pay the final balance for the custom-carved cocktail hour ice sculpture my mother had deemed absolutely essential. As I hit confirm, a wave of nausea washed over me. What was I doing? At this rate, I'd have nothing left. The night before the wedding, I was still at the venue at midnight, directing the setup crew, solving one last-minute crisis after another. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. Don't forget to pick up Olivia's mother's special diet breakfast by 700 a.m., nothing with gluten. I hadn't had a full night's sleep in weeks. My back ached, my emergency fund was a ghost, and as I stood alone in that half-decorated ballroom, a bizarre feeling washed over me. It felt like I was meticulously setting the stage for my own public humiliation. Little did I know how right I was. The morning of Leo and Olivia's wedding dawned crisp and clear, a perfect New England autumn day. By 6:00 a.m., I was already out the door, picking up Olivia's mother's gluten-free breakfast, double-checking with vendors, and hand-delivering welcome bags to the hotel rooms of VIP guests. My own dress and makeup would have to be squeezed in at the last possible second. I arrived at the Fairmont Copley Plaza Ballroom just as the floral team was putting the final touches on those infamous suspended orchid installations. I had to admit they were breathtaking. Waterfalls of white and pale pink blossoms cascaded from the ceiling like something out of a dream. They also cost me nearly $4,000 more than we had originally budgeted. "Amelia, thank God you're here." My mother rushed over already in a silk robe, her hair and makeup flawlessly done. "There's a typo on the Henderson's Place card. It's simply unacceptable." No good morning, no thank you for handling everything. Just straight to the next fire I needed to put out. I spent the next 3 hours in a frantic haze reorganizing the seating chart when an unexpected +1 showed up, calming Olivia down when her makeup artist was 15 minutes late, hunting down my brother when he ducked out for a quick drink with his groomsmen. The ceremony itself was undeniably beautiful. The historic Old South Church was glowing with candlelight as Olivia floated down the aisle in a custom Vera Wang gown. Leo actually teared up when he saw her, which surprised me. Maybe there was some real love there after all. As I watched them exchange vows, a toxic cocktail of emotions churned inside me. Pride that I'd helped pull this off, simmering resentment at what it had cost me both financially and emotionally, and a sharp pang of loneliness, wondering if I'd ever have a day like this for myself. And underneath it all, that persistent nagging feeling that my contribution would be completely erased. That feeling was confirmed at the reception. I overheard my mother talking to her friends near the bar, a champagne flute in her hand. "Everything just came together so beautifully," she was saying. "Catherine Thorne does it again, you know. I personally selected those orchid installations. They're going to be featured in Boston weddings next month." Not a single word about my role. Not a whisper about who had actually paid for those damn orchids. Later during dinner, I was seated at a table in Siberia, far from the wedding party, with some distant cousins and Olivia's old co-workers. As I picked at my $125 a plate salmon, Olivia's father stopped by my table. "Quite the affair your parents have put on," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Robert mentioned they spared no expense. That's how you do it when it's your only son, right?" I forced a smile and nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Apparently, my parents were taking full credit for the wedding I had almost single-handedly financed. Even Leo's acknowledgement was a brief throwaway comment. He caught me adjusting a centerpiece and said, "Hey, thanks for helping with all this stuff. Olivia's really happy." Then he was immediately whisked away for another champagne toast. Around 9:00 p.m., as the band played and the dance floor filled up, I escaped to the ladies' room for a moment of peace. I locked myself in a stall and finally let the tears come. Hot, silent tears of frustration and exhaustion. I had drained my savings, worked myself to the bone, and for what, to be treated like the hired help. I was splashing cold water on my face when Chloe found me. "I've been looking all over for you," she said, her face etched with concern. "Are you okay?" "No," I admitted, the word finally breaking free. "I'm not okay. This whole thing has been a huge mistake. I've let them use me, again." Chloe handed me a tissue. "It's not too late to stand up for yourself, you know. You don't have to keep playing the part they wrote for you." What am I supposed to do? Make a scene at my brother's wedding? No, but maybe it's time to start setting some serious boundaries. The wedding's almost over. You've fulfilled your obligations. After tonight, things need to change. I nodded, knowing she was right. As I reapplied my mascara, I made a silent vow. This was the last time. The absolute last time I would sacrifice my own well-being for my family's approval. Little did I know that vow was about to be tested sooner than I could have ever imagined. As I walked back to the reception, I passed the small office the hotel had provided for storing personal items. The door was slightly ajar, and I heard my mother's voice low and conspiratorial. "It's already done," she was saying. "She'll never even notice." Then my brother's voice hesitant. "I don't know, Mom. Amelia's already spent so much." "Don't be ridiculous, Leo. It's just sitting in her account doing nothing. This way it benefits the whole family. Now get back to your wife before she wonders where you've gone." I ducked back out of sight before they could exit, my heart hammering against my ribs. What had they done? What were they talking about? The rest of the reception passed in a blur of forced smiles and a rising tide of anxiety. I couldn't shake the chilling feeling that something was terribly, terribly wrong. The second the last guest left, I fled back to my apartment and threw open my laptop. I had a sickening suspicion about what I was about to find. Sunday morning, I woke up with a splitting headache and that same cold dread in the pit of my stomach. I'd barely slept, tossing and turning as my mother's words echoed in my head, "She'll never even notice." Still in my pajamas, I brewed a pot of coffee so strong you could stand a spoon up in it and opened my laptop. With trembling fingers, I logged into my online banking portal, and there it was, the confirmation of my absolute worst fear. A transfer of $8,400 had been made from my savings account at 9:17 p.m. the previous night. The exact time I'd been hiding in the bathroom having my breakdown. The recipient, Catherine Thorne. The room started to spin. This couldn't be real. I refreshed the page praying it was a glitch in the system. But the transaction details were stark and clear. Transfer to Catherine Thorne. Memo wedding. I hadn't authorized it. I hadn't been anywhere near my phone or my banking app when it happened. How was this even possible? Panic clawed at my throat as I dialed my bank's customer service line. After fighting my way through an automated menu, I finally got a human being. "I need to report an unauthorized transaction," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "I see the transfer you're referring to, ma'am," the representative said after a moment. "It appears it was made through your mobile banking app using your login credentials." "That's impossible," I insisted. "I wasn't using my phone at that time." "Was your phone in your possession the entire evening, Ms. Thorne?" I thought back. My small clutch purse. I'd left it at the head table during dinner while I was running around putting out fires, checking on vendors, making sure everything was running smoothly. Anyone could have grabbed my phone. I'm not sure," I admitted, my voice small. The representative explained that they could open a fraud investigation, but the process would take weeks. And since it looked like it had been authorized with my own credentials, there was no guarantee I'd ever see the money again. After I hung up, I just sat there in stunned silence. Then a cold, methodical rage started to build. I began gathering my evidence. I took screenshots of the fraudulent transfer. I pulled up my text message history, proving I was nowhere near my phone at 9:17 p.m. A text to the band leader at 9:08, and another to the venue coordinator at 9:25. Then I remembered something else. My banking app required either my fingerprint or a PIN for any transfer. Neither would be easy to bypass. Unless someone knew my PIN. And then it hit me like a punch to the gut. My PIN was Leo's birthday, a number my mother would of course know. As the pieces clicked into place, I felt physically sick. My own mother had stolen from me, and based on the conversation I'd overheard, my brother knew about it. With my hands shaking, I called Chloe. "They stole from me," I said, my voice cracking the second she answered. "My own family stole over $8,000 from my account." "What?" Chloe's shock was palpable. "Amelia, are you sure?" I laid it all out for her, the transfer, the conversation, the timing, the PIN. "You need to confront them," Chloe said, her voice firm. "And you might want to talk to a lawyer first." She was right. I had a friend from college, Sophia, who was a family law attorney. I texted her immediately, and she agreed to meet me for coffee that afternoon. In the meantime, I kept digging. I downloaded my bank statements for the past 6 months. I compiled a detailed spreadsheet of every single wedding expense I had covered, complete with dates and amounts. I dug up every email and text message that showed their escalating financial demands. Sophia listened intently as I laid out the whole sordid story, taking occasional notes. "This is straightforward theft, Amelia," she said when I finished. "The fact that their family doesn't change the legal reality. You have several options from filing a police report to sending a formal demand letter. The question is, what outcome do you want?" I hadn't even thought that far ahead. What did I want? My money back, obviously, I said slowly. But more than that, I want them to acknowledge what they did. I want them to understand that they can't treat me this way anymore. Sophia nodded. "Then we start with a strongly worded letter. We'll demand the immediate return of all the funds, the unauthorized transfer, and potentially all the wedding expenses you were pressured into covering. We'll make it crystal clear that failure to comply will result in legal action, including potential criminal charges for theft and fraud." She helped me draft the letter right then and there, making sure to include specific amounts, dates, and a detailed account of how they had illegally accessed my bank account. We also prepared a simple police report ready to be filed at a moment's notice. As I left Sophia's office clutching the documents, I felt a strange cocktail of terror and resolve. The thought of confronting my family made my stomach churn. These were the people who had spent my entire life belittling and dismissing me, who had made me feel like my only worth was my usefulness to them. But underneath that deep-seated fear was something new, something unfamiliar, righteous anger. They had crossed a line, a big one. They had stolen from me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The post-wedding family brunch was scheduled for 1100 a.m., the next day at my parents' house. It was the perfect ambush. As I got ready for bed that night, I placed the envelope containing Sophia's letter, the prepared police report, and all my evidence on my nightstand. Tomorrow was going to be different. Tomorrow, I was finally going to fight back. My parents' house looked exactly as it always had, immaculate, imposing, and cold. The grand colonial with its perfectly manicured lawn and tasteful seasonal decorations gave no hint of the storm that was about to break. I sat in my car for a full 5 minutes, my hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my racing heart. "You can do this," I whispered to my reflection in the rearview mirror. I had dressed for battle in a navy blue blazer and tailored pants, my power suit for high-stakes client meetings. The envelope with my arsenal of evidence was tucked securely in my purse. The housekeeper answered the door with her usual polite, distant smile. "They're in the sunroom, Miss Amelia." I could hear the cheerful clinking of mimosa glasses and light chatter before I even stepped into the room. My mother was holding court as usual, regaling Olivia's parents with some story, while my father nodded along. Leo and Olivia were curled up together on the love seat, looking exhausted but happy. No one seemed to notice me at first. "Amelia, finally," my mother said when she spotted me. "We were about to start without you. Brunch is getting cold." "Sorry I'm late," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I had some banking issues to sort out this morning." A flicker of something annoyance guilt crossed my mother's face, but she quickly smoothed it over. "Well, you're here now. Have a mimosa and help yourself to the buffet." The spread was, of course, elaborate. Smoked salmon eggs, Benedict fresh fruit pastries from that ridiculously expensive French bakery my mother adored. I took a plate, but my stomach was in such a tight knot I couldn't imagine eating. We managed about 20 minutes of excruciatingly superficial small talk about the wedding. How beautiful it was, how moving the ceremony was, how delicious the cake was. Olivia's parents were gushing in their praise of my parents' generosity for hosting such a magnificent event. "Well," my mother said, preening under the compliments, "nothing but the best for our only son." That was my cue. "Speaking of the best," I said, setting down my untouched plate, "I noticed something interesting when I checked my bank account this morning." The room didn't go silent, but the atmosphere shifted instantly. My father glanced up from his newspaper. Leo suddenly became fascinated by the dregs of his coffee. "There was a transfer made last night." I continued, looking directly at my mother. "During the reception, for $8,400, from my account to yours, Mom." Olivia's parents exchanged an uncomfortable glance. "I'm not sure what you're talking about, Amelia," my mother said, her voice light as air, but her eyes shot daggers at me. "Oh, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. Someone took my phone during the reception, accessed my banking app, and transferred money to your account without my knowledge or permission." My father cleared his throat. "Perhaps this isn't the appropriate time or place for this discussion." When would be appropriate, Dad? When I'm not around. When you can all discuss it behind my back like you've been doing this entire time. Olivia's mother stood up awkwardly. Perhaps we should give you all some privacy. No, please stay, I said, my voice firm. I'd like to have witnesses for this. My mother's face hardened into a familiar mask of disdain. You're being ridiculous and dramatic as usual. If there was a transfer, I'm sure it was for something we had already discussed for the wedding. We never discussed an additional $8,400, and we certainly never discussed you hacking into my bank account without my permission. Amelia, my father cut in, his CEO voice now activated. Your mother and I have spent a fortune on this wedding. If there were some additional expenses that needed covering, I'm sure it was simply a miscommunication. A miscommunication. I pulled out my phone and held up the screenshots. This was a deliberate fraudulent transfer made while I was busy working at a reception that, by the way, I largely paid for. I have proof I wasn't even near my phone when it happened. Leo finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Amelia, I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Mom probably thought... Stop, I cut him off. I heard you two, last night, in the office. I heard Mom say, she'll never even notice. And I heard you worrying about how much I'd already spent. My mother's face morphed from defensive to defiant. Fine, yes, I made the transfer. That money was needed for the honeymoon upgrade we discussed, the private island excursion. Remember, someone had to pay for it. And that someone had to be me, without my knowledge or consent. Oh, please, my mother scoffed, setting down her mimosa with a sharp clink. It's not as if you're using that money for anything important. This was your brother's special day. I have already contributed nearly $22,000 to Leo's special day. My voice was rising despite my desperate attempts to keep it level. Money I have been saving for years for a down payment on my own home. Olivia's eyes widened. $22,000, she turned to Leo, her face a mask of confusion. My mother waved a dismissive hand. Amelia likes to exaggerate. She helped with a few minor details, that's all. That's when I pulled the folder from my bag and slapped it down on the glass-top table, making the plates rattle. I have receipts for every single expense. The floral installations, me. The welcome baskets, me. The photographer, the cocktail hour upgrades, the linen rentals, all me. My father frowned, reaching for the folder. Let me see that. And now, I continued, my voice shaking with a rage I had suppressed for a lifetime. You actually stole from me. You took my phone, you used my PIN, and you transferred money without my permission. That's theft, Mom. That's fraud. And then she laughed. A cold, dismissive sound that cut me deeper than any insult ever had. And what exactly do you think you're going to do about it? Amelia Sue? Your own mother? Call the police on your family. Don't be absurd. She was gaining confidence now, seeing what she thought was uncertainty in my eyes. This is family business, and it will stay that way. The money has already been spent on Leo and Olivia's behalf. It's done. The room was dead silent. Olivia's parents looked like they wanted the floor to swallow them whole. My father was flipping through my receipts, his frown deepening with every page. Leo looked pale and sick, and my mother sat there smug, certain she had won. My hands were trembling, but I reached into my bag again. Actually, I said, my voice quiet but clear, I can do quite a lot. I pulled out the crisp white envelope Sophia had prepared and placed it on the table. This, I said, contains a formal demand letter for the return of all unauthorized funds prepared by my lawyer. It also contains a completed police report for theft and fraud ready to be filed. My mother's smirk faltered. You're bluffing. I also have evidence that you accessed my phone without permission. I went on as if she hadn't spoken. The banking app logged the GPS coordinates of the transfer, the exact location of the Fairmont Copley Plaza ballroom, and I have text messages proving I was in a completely different part of the venue at that precise moment. My father finally looked up from the receipts, his face uncharacteristically grave. Catherine, did you really transfer money from Amelia's account without her knowledge? For the first time, my mother looked rattled. Robert, she's being completely unreasonable. It was for Leo's honeymoon. We've always helped the children. Theft isn't helping, Mom, I interjected. And I'm not a child. I'm a 31-year-old woman who worked her ass off for every single dollar you took. Don't you worry about what happens next, I added, throwing her own words back at her. My lawyer has outlined it all very clearly in the letter. You have 48 hours to return the full amount of $8,400 plus interest. If you fail to do so, I will file the police report and pursue every legal remedy available. My mother's face flushed with a deep, mottled red. You wouldn't dare. Think of what this would do to the family name, to the business, your brother's reputation. You should have thought of that before you stole from me. My father was now reading the lawyer's letter, his expression growing more grim with each sentence. Catherine, this is serious. They're threatening criminal charges. It's a bluff, my mother insisted, but her voice lacked its usual iron conviction. It's not a bluff, I said, standing up. And there's one more thing. The Fairmont has security cameras in all its public hallways. I've already submitted a request for the footage from last night showing who entered and exited the office where my purse was left. That should make for some interesting viewing for the fraud investigators. Leo finally found his voice. Mom, did you really take Amelia's phone and transfer the money without asking her? My mother glared at him. I did what was necessary for your honeymoon. Your sister was being difficult about the additional expenses. Difficult? I repeated, incredulous. I spent my entire life savings on this wedding. There was nothing left to give. You spent that much? Leo looked genuinely stunned. Mom told me you were just helping with a few small things, that most of it was coming from them and Olivia's parents. Well, she lied, I said bluntly. Just like she's been lying to everyone about who really paid for this wedding. Suddenly, Olivia stood up, her face pale with distress. I had no idea, Amelia. Truly. I never would have asked for half of those things if I had known you were the one paying for them. She turned to my mother, hot anger flashing in her eyes. You told me her company was sponsoring a lot of it as a portfolio builder, that she wanted to use our wedding to attract more high-end clients. The mimosa glass Olivia had been holding slipped from her hand. It shattered on the hardwood floor with a sharp crack that made everyone jump. The orange juice splashed across my mother's priceless cream-colored rug, a perfect ugly stain spreading across the pristine surface. In the shocked silence that followed, I picked up my purse and the envelope. You have 48 hours, I repeated. Then I turned and walked out, leaving my stunned family in the wreckage. The sound of shattering glass seemed to echo in the air as I walked head high toward the front door. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. But for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't the one backing down. Amelia, wait. It was Leo's voice. I paused my hand on the heavy doorknob but didn't turn around. Please, he said, his footsteps hurrying closer. We need to talk about this. I took a deep breath and finally faced him. My brother looked completely shattered, his newlywed glow utterly extinguished. There's nothing to talk about, Leo. Mom stole from me. She's been manipulating all of us and I am done. I didn't know, he pleaded, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. I swear, Amelia, I had no idea how much you were contributing. Mom just kept saying everything was handled, that you were happy to help with a few things. From the sunroom, I could hear the eruption of raised voices, my father's deep baritone demanding answers, my mother's shrill defensive replies, Olivia's parents' shocked exclamations. Would it have mattered if you had known? I asked, my voice quiet. You've never stood up for me, Leo. Not once. The raw hurt in his eyes looked real, but I'd been fooled by this family for far too long. I'm sorry, he said, the words sounding hollow. You're right. I've always just gone along with whatever Mom and Dad wanted. It was easier. Well, it hasn't been easy for me. Before Leo could respond, my mother stormed into the foyer, her face a mask of pure fury. How dare you, she hissed. How dare you air our private business in front of Olivia's parents? Do you have any idea what you've done? My father appeared behind her, looking older and more tired than I had ever seen him. Catherine, that's enough. No, Robert. She's threatening to go to the police over a simple misunderstanding after everything we've done for her. What exactly have you done for me, Mom? I shot back. Belittled my career, dismissed my feelings, used me as a personal ATM for Leo's wedding. We gave you everything, she shrieked. The best school's a position in the family company, which came with constant criticism and zero respect. I finished for her. And none of that gives you the right to steal from me. Olivia and her parents had emerged from the sunroom, now hovering awkwardly in the background of our family implosion. Olivia looked like she was on the verge of tears. Mr. and Mrs. Bancroft, I said, addressing them directly, I sincerely apologize that you had to witness this, but I think it's important that everything is finally out in the open. Olivia's father nodded stiffly. We understand. And for what it's worth, we had no idea about any of this. My mother made a small choked sound watching her carefully constructed social standing crumble in real time. My father stepped forward, slipping into his familiar role of patriarch and problem solver. Amelia, let's discuss this rationally. The money will be returned to your account. Immediately. With interest. There is no need for legal action or police involvement. It's not just about the money, Dad. It's about respect. It's about boundaries. It's about finally being treated like an actual member of this family, instead of someone you can just use and throw away. That's not fair, my mother protested. Isn't it? You've always looked down on me, made me feel less than, taken advantage of my desire for your approval. My voice was steady now, the trembling gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Years of suppressed anger and hurt were finally finding a voice. I have spent my entire life twisting myself into pretzels trying to be the daughter you wanted. I have given up my savings, my time, my self-respect, all to please you, and it has never ever been enough. I looked at each of them in turn, my red-faced mother, my grave-faced father, my conflicted brother. I'm done. I said the words, feeling powerful on my tongue. I am done trying to earn love that should have been given freely. I'm done being the family ATM and doormat. I'm done. A heavy silence descended on the entryway. Outside, through the beveled glass of the front door, I could see autumn leaves swirling in the wind. Inside, time seemed to stand still. It was Olivia who broke the silence. Amelia is right, she said, stepping forward to stand next to me, a surprising act of solidarity. What happened wasn't a misunderstanding. It was wrong, and I refuse to start my marriage based on this kind of deception. She turned to Leo. We need to make this right. My brother looked from Olivia to me, then back to our parents. For perhaps the first time in his life, he seemed to be truly weighing his choices independent of their influence. Olivia's right, he said finally, his voice firm. Mom, Dad, this isn't how we treat family. Amelia deserves better. She always has. My mother looked like she'd been slapped. Leo, you can't possibly. I can, and I am, he interrupted. The money will be returned today, all of it. Not just the $400 from last night, but everything Amelia contributed to our wedding. We'll figure out how to pay her back even if it takes us years. And there needs to be an apology, Olivia added. A real one. My father nodded slowly. Agreed, Catherine. My mother looked trapped, her eyes darting between them like a cornered animal. For a second, I almost felt a flicker of pity for her. Almost. This was likely the first time in her entire adult life that her manipulations had been so thoroughly exposed and rejected by her own family. I may have been overzealous in my desire to give you and Olivia the perfect wedding, she finally conceded, though her tone still dripped with self-justification. You stole from your daughter, Catherine, my father said bluntly. Call it what it is. The stark, ugly word hung in the air. My mother's shoulders sagged, her perfect posture finally breaking. I took money without permission. She admitted the words, sounding like they were being physically pulled from her. It was wrong. It was a pathetic apology, but it was more of an admission of wrongdoing than I had ever received from her in my entire life. The money will be in your account by the end of the day, my father promised. All of it. And Amelia, I owe you an apology too. I should have been paying closer attention. I should have protected you. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. This wasn't the time for an emotional reunion. There was too much damage, too many years of hurt to be erased by a single confrontation. Thank you, I said simply. I'll be expecting the transfer. I pulled open the front door, letting in a gust of cool autumn air. This doesn't fix everything, I added, looking back at them one last time. But it's a start. As I walked to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if I had finally set down a massive, invisible weight I'd been carrying my whole life. The future of my relationship with my family was a giant, murky question mark, but for the first time I was the one setting the terms, and that made all the difference. True to my father's word, the money appeared in my account that evening. Not just the stolen $400, but the full $786 I had spent on the wedding, plus a little extra for interest. I stared at the balance on my phone screen for a long time, the numbers glowing in the dark. The money was back, but something fundamental had shifted. The confrontation had ripped the perfectly tailored facade off our family dynamic, exposing the rot underneath. It was excruciating, but it was also strangely freeing, like lancing a wound to finally let it heal. The days that followed were eerily quiet. No calls from my mother, which was a first. My father sent a single formal email confirming the transfer and suggesting we all take some time. Leo texted me several times, his messages awkward but seemingly sincere. I never meant for any of this to happen. I should have stood up for you sooner. I ignored them at first, wrapping myself in a blanket of righteous anger. But as the days turned into a week, I started to wonder if this painful rupture could actually lead to something better. A week after the brunch, I had my first appointment with a therapist Chloe had recommended. Family dynamics like these don't develop overnight, Dr. Evans said, and they don't resolve overnight either. But recognizing the toxic patterns is the first step toward breaking them. Over the next few weeks, she helped me unpack how deeply I had internalized my family's narrative, how I had come to believe my value was tied to my usefulness, how I had accepted emotional and financial manipulation as normal. You're describing a classic golden child and scapegoat dynamic, she explained. Your brother was constantly elevated while you were devalued. It's an unhealthy system that served your parents' needs but damaged both of you. It was grueling work. Some days I left her office feeling raw and exposed. But slowly I started to build a sense of my own worth, one that wasn't dependent on their approval. Chloe was my rock through all of it. I'm so proud of you, she told me over dinner one night. Do you realize how much courage it took to do what you did? My professional life started to change too. With my savings restored, I had the freedom to be more selective. I rebranded my business, launching a boutique event planning company that specialized in creating meaningful, beautiful celebrations on realistic budgets. My tagline, "Extraordinary moments don't require extraordinary spending," was my quiet little rebellion. About 2 months after the confrontation, my mother called. The conversation was stiff, careful. Your father and we've started seeing a family therapist. She said, the words sounding foreign in her mouth. She suggested I reach out. I was floored. The Catherine Thorne I knew would rather die than admit she needed help. She says we have unhealthy patterns, that we've been unfair to you. It wasn't a real apology, but for my mother it was revolutionary. Leo and Olivia invited me to dinner at their new apartment after they got back from their honeymoon. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Leo said, about how I benefited from the way Mom and Dad treated us differently. I never questioned it because it always worked out for me. I'm so sorry, Amelia. Their sincerity felt real, and the wall I'd built around my heart cracked just a little. When Thanksgiving rolled around, I broke tradition. Instead of going to the formal, stuffy Thorne family dinner, I went with Chloe to her family's chaotic, warm, and loving get-together at their lake house in New Hampshire. As her grandmother taught me her secret cranberry sauce recipe, I felt a pang of what I'd been missing my whole life. By Christmas, I felt strong enough to accept a modified invitation Christmas Eve dinner, but no overnight stay. The evening was tense but different. When my mother criticized my dessert choice, I didn't crumble. I like simple sometimes, I said calmly. Not everything needs to be elaborate to be valuable. She was taken aback, but after a moment she just said, I suppose that's true. In the new year, I put a down payment on a small condo in Cambridge, a place that was truly mine. As I signed the papers, I thought about the journey that had brought me there. Standing up to my family was the hardest thing I'd ever done. The aftermath was messy and painful, but on the other side of it all was freedom. Freedom from their expectations, and the freedom to define my own worth. Here's the lesson in all of this. Your value as a person is not determined by how useful you are to others, especially your family. You are not an ATM, a free therapist, or a perpetual problem solver. You deserve to be loved and respected for who you are, not for what you can provide. Setting boundaries is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of self-preservation. It is the only way to break toxic cycles and teach people how to treat you, It will be scary and it will be hard, but your peace is worth the battle. Have you ever had to confront a family member and set a hard boundary? How did it turn out? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience could give someone else the courage they need. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice and taking back your power.